This is Professor Shin Hee-seok, Chairman of Asia Pacific Policy Research Institute, which is authorized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I worked for 20 years as a professor of the Institute of Foreign Affairs and National Security. Another deputy panelist and ambassador from Thailand is not yet arrived here, but we'll start just the time ago. We'll come soon. Today we are very happy to invite distinguished ambassadors working here in Korea. Most ambassador, foreign ambassador Honorable from Japan, was an excellent ambassador. Also here ambassador here in the audience too. Listen to me. Distinct views and perspectives from them. Trustpolitik is a representative by the Pakistan government, large representative of the trust building process in the Korean Peninsula particularly. It's really prerequisite and also very important, very new initiative to bring in peace and stability in Korean Peninsula. That's why the people spoke very highly of that. Today we would like to listen to views from the ambassadors, including our respectable the Vice Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and also listen to the different perspectives, different views and angles from those ambassadors. We'll listen to our keynote speech first from Vice Foreign Minister for 20 minutes. So later on we'll listen to the respective perspectives, viewpoints on the 4 different ambassadors from different perspectives for 10 minutes. And we'll give the discussion for our audience and back to our stage again, with this 1.5 hour later, approximately. First, let me introduce you the Ambassador Cho Tae-yul, who is the Vice Foreign Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Vice Minister Cho Tae-yul is a Seoul National University graduate, also studied at the Oxford University in the United Kingdom. He began to work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs since 1979, and he worked in the South, twice in Washington, D.C., our embassy in the United States, and also in the Director General of the Bilateral Trade Bureau of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, an ambassador in the Korean Permanent Mission to his United Nations office, and other international organizations in Geneva, Switzerland too. He is one of our respectable colleagues. People say very highly of him, like him. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you Vice Minister of the Republic of Korea, Ambassador Cho Tae-yul, please.
Thank you. Well, it's good to have you as our moderator of this session, and participating with all of my dear colleagues from the diplomatic community and so on. I look forward to the lively and interactive discussions this morning. My statement will be somewhat longer than you would expect, but I think this is a privilege for the first speaker, and I just hope that my long statement will not bore you too much. As you know, the year 2014 is a special year from the perspective of the world history, as it marks the centennial anniversary of the end of the post-World War and the 25th anniversary of German unification. Next year will mark the 70th year of division of the Korean Peninsula, and yet distrust, tensions and conflict run high between the two Koreas. At this critical juncture, I think it is a meaningful exercise to review the major changes surrounding in the security environment surrounding the Korean Peninsula and the challenges these changes may pose to the Korea's foreign policy today and tomorrow. Henry Kissinger once said that each success only buys an admission ticket to a more difficult problem. I don't think there was a time in the past that these words sunk in as much as they did during the past 1 year. Indeed, Korea's foreign policy is faced with an extremely difficult and complex environment. We have been struggling day and night to resolve a variety of problems rushing toward us spontaneously from coast to globe. Today, Korea's diplomacy is being undertaken in the most serious and complex external security environment since the end of the Cold War. During the Cold War period, all the foreign policy issues were addressed without much difficulty, as we had only to follow the camp logic. But today, not a single issue can be resolved or addressed with simple equation. Rather, the majority of the problems require a multi-dimensional solution as well as strategic thinking. The Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ incident that occurred in the East China Sea late last year is a case in point. It was a very sensitive and complicated problem, as the security and foreign policy and strategic interests of China, which have been lately announced at ADIZ, and those of Korea, Japan, and the United States were intertwined closely. Therefore, it was never easy for Korea to secure its national interests while not undermining the cooperative and friendly relations of these countries, with these countries. Under such a difficult circumstances, however, Korea was able to catch two rabbits at the same time. Perhaps it may indicate that Korea is no longer a shrimp whose back breaks when the waves fight, and its diplomacy has become more articulate and skillful, if I may say so. The ADIZ issue is only one example that symbolizes the challenges of our foreign policy. We are facing different challenges every day, and we will continue to run into many more in the future. The important thing is to run these challenges into opportunities with a wise and principled diplomacy. The major changes in the external security environment that pose both challenges and opportunities to Korea's foreign policy today can be epitomized into four. First, the rise of China. Second, the historical revision in Japan. Third, the return of an assertive Russia. And fourth, an anachronistic North Korea with its nuclear ambition. Let me further elaborate on each of these four change challenges. First, the rise of China is the most important factor in dealing with not only Northeast Asia, but also the international order in the 21st century, and it's at the heart of international discourse on realigning the global governance. In 2010, China became the number 2 economy in the world. According to a recent report, China's GDP surpassed that of the United States in terms of purchasing power parity. Based on this economic confidence, China is actively pursuing its foreign policy. The policy of the so-called Daogangyanghui that had been in place from the Deng Xiaoping to Hu Jintao era seems to be transitioning to a policy that goes beyond Yosu-Wei, which means China is moving away from its discreet attitude of waiting for the right time while building strength to one that is more proactive and assertive by flexing its muscles if and when it is necessary. Like the term butterfly effect, when China takes a certain position on a major international issue, the impact can be felt immediately across the globe. This development will inevitably bring about some type of change in its relations with the United States, which has been exercising absolute influence in the Asia-Pacific region. The United States has been pursuing the policy of rebalancing to Asia from the start of the first Obama administration. This can be seen as a strategic response to defend and promote the U.S. security and foreign policy interests in the Asia-Pacific, where China is rising rapidly. And the so-called new type of great power relationship that President Xi Jinping presented last year as the vision of the U.S.-China relationship appears to be China's response to the U.S. policy toward the Asia-Pacific. China's new initiative taken at the 4th CICA summit held in Shanghai last week to build a new Asia security order and develop CICA into a platform for security dialogue and cooperation for Asia can also be understood in this context. China has also been engaged in active diplomacy to strengthen its relations with its neighbors. President Xi Jinping visited Russia as his first foreign trip and demonstrated the solidarity between China and Russia by holding a summit meeting with President Putin at the margin of the Sea Pacific. They even went further to carry out a large-scale joint military exercise in the East China Sea. China also appears to be taking bold steps to strengthen its position in Southeast Asia. As you know, China is now in a standoff with Vietnam over a Chinese oil rig in the water off the Peninsula Island. Without a doubt, the rise of China has a great impact on Korea's foreign policy, the backbone of which has been the Korea-US alliance. The Korea-US alliance, which celebrated its 60th anniversary last year, is stronger than ever. It not only became the linchpin for the peace and security in the Korean Peninsula, Northeast Asia, and the Asia Pacific, but it has also developed into a comprehensive strategic partnership with the entry into force of the Korea's FTA in 2012. Marking the 20th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties 2 years ago, the Korea-China relationship has never been better. As Korea's #1 export market and investment destination, China has become Korea's single most important economic partner. The strategic cooperative partnership between Korea and China will make another leap forward when the ongoing bilateral FTA negotiations are completed. After taking office, President Park Geun-hye, by actively pursuing summit diplomacy during the past 1 year, has built a deep personal trust with both President Obama and President Xi Jinping. And based on this, Korea's relations with the US and China have been deepening and broadening. However, it won't be an easy task to further strengthen the robust Korea-US alliance while upgrading the strategic partnership with China in a balanced and harmonious way. This will demand of us a creative and strategic thinking, as well as prudent policy judgments and decisions. It is indeed the most important yet difficult challenge facing Korea's foreign policy today. By the same token, where the strategic interests of the US and China in Northeast Asia collide or maintain harmony is probably the most important factor that will define the external environment in Korea's foreign policy. If the relations between China and the US get more difficult, maneuvering room for Korea's diplomacy will grow smaller. However, if Korea is able to address this challenge wisely by building trust both with the US and China, then room for Korea's diplomacy will expand, which in turn will provide new opportunities for Korea to play a constructive role in the region. This is why I believe that the North Korean issue, including the nuclear problem, poses both challenges and opportunities to Korea's foreign policy. Second, the historical revisionism that is emerging in Japan, with the slogans of normalization of the country and proactive contribution to peace under the Abe administration, is deepening the tensions with neighboring countries, including China and Korea. It is making the political landscape of Northeast Asia more complex. This movement, which stems from the wrong perception of history and misguided nationalism of some politicians, is a problem not only for Northeast Asia, but also for the international community as a whole. It is all the more so because behind this movement lies the intention of rewriting the history and changing the post-war international order. I believe the leading media in the US, Europe, and Southeast Asia are strongly criticizing Japan's historical revisionism because they share these concerns. Washington Post even used the term historical denialism. The recent New York Times op-ed by a German journalist titled "What Germany Can Teach Japan" hit the nail on the head concerning the problems of Japan under the Abe administration. The author said, and I quote, "Normalcy is not something that is granted. It must be sought out and earned. Japan will become a normal country only when it follows Germany's example of earning trust by showing genuine remorse for its past mistakes and seeking forgiveness in earnest. On the issue of exercising the right to collective self-defense too, the Abe government should first make efforts to earn the trust of the neighboring countries prior to pursuing substantive discussions. And the discussion should be conducted in a transparent and prudent manner, given the concerns of the neighboring countries over historical issues. Currently, the US is facing a serious dilemma due to the tension between Korea and Japan. Since Korea and Japan are the strongest allies of the United States in this region, the deteriorating relations between the two are undermining U.S. strategic interests in the region. The relationship between the Korea-U.S. alliance and the Japan-U.S. alliance is one of shared growth, not one of zero-sum. Therefore, it would be inconceivable for the U.S. to sacrifice one for the other. From the U.S. perspective, the trilateral security cooperation among Korea, Japan, and the U.S. is strategically important, especially in dealing with the rising China and increasingly unstable North Korea with its nuclear program. This is why President Obama made efforts to realize the Korea-US-Japan trilateral summit on the sidelines of the nuclear security summit held in The Hague last March, and to improve the relations between Seoul and Tokyo during his visit to the two countries in April. We had hoped to see a new momentum to improve the Korea-Japan relations since the trilateral summit in The Hague. Unfortunately, however, we have yet to see the light at the end of the tunnel. The future prospects are not all that promising either, in my personal view. As the main architect of the post-war regional order, I hope and expect that the U.S. will play a more active role in preventing the resurrection of historical revisionism that can potentially undermine the stability in the region. Realistically speaking, I believe that it is only the United States that holds the key to change Japan. With all these gloomy pictures, however, we have seen a narrow window of opportunity for moving forward. After many ups and downs, Korea and Japan agreed to hold bilateral meeting at the Director General level to address the so-called comfort women issue, and 2 rounds of meeting have been held so far. I hope that Japan will address this important issue with sincerity at the forthcoming monthly meetings so that it can pave the way for improving the Korea-Japan relations. By doing so, I hope that next year we can celebrate in good spirits the 50th anniversary of normalization of our bilateral relations. Let me now move on to the third challenge, the return of Russia. Korea and Russia agreed to establish a strategic cooperative partnership in 2008, but not much progress had been made in the following years. It was only when new leaders took office in both Korea and Russia that a new momentum was created. Since then, the Korea-Russia relations have been making significant progress, especially in the aftermath of 2 summit meetings. The Look East policy of President Putin and the Eurasia initiative of President Park have come together for projects such as the Najin Hassan logistic cooperation project to become a reality. However, the Korea-Russian relations are now facing new challenges due to the outbreak of the Ukraine crisis earlier this year. Some people are going as far as to describe the conflict between Russia and the West following Russia's takeover of the Crimean Peninsula as the return of history, or return to the Cold War, or return of geopolitics. It is only natural that the Korea-Russia relationship will be affected by the development in Ukraine. We are also worried that the Ukraine crisis can send a warning signal to Pyongyang when it comes to dealing with the North Korean nuclear issue. Since the worsening of the situation in Ukraine will only impose greater burden on the countries concerned, the cautious optimism is rising that the situation will soon calm down. We hope that will be the case, as Russia is an important partner for Korea, not only to resolve the North Korean nuclear issue, but also in our efforts to pursue Trustpolitik. It is critical to have an external security environment that is less confrontational. In this context, we welcome the fact that the elections in Ukraine were held peacefully on May 25th, according to schedule. Finally, on an anachronistic North Korea with its nuclear program. It goes without saying that the North Korean issue and its nuclear missions pose the biggest threat and challenge to the security on the Korean Peninsula. Notwithstanding the international community's united message that North Korea should give up its nuclear weapons program and walk on a path towards reform and openness, Kim Jong-un conducted the third nuclear test in February last year, and a month later, publicly announced the simultaneous pursuit of nuclear armament and economic development. In particular, after the execution of Chang Son-taek last December, the growing volatility and uncertainty in North Korea has become a greater threat to the security in the Korean Peninsula and in Northeast Asia. Moreover, North Korea has continuously elevated the level of provocations by threatening to conduct an additional nuclear test and to launch ballistic missiles. It was against this backdrop that Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se visited New York earlier this month on the occasion of Korea's presidency on the UN Security Council for this month, and gave a serious warning that if North Korea conducts another nuclear test, the regime will pay the heaviest price. This will entail stronger sanctions not only from the UN Security Council, but also from individual countries. Looking back upon the past, we come to realize that historical opportunities for transformational change in the Korean relationship arrived in the Korean Peninsula almost every 2 decades. In the 1970s, thanks to the East-West détente, the inter-Korean relations experienced a brief flowing period. In the 1990s, after the end of the Cold War, some progress was made in improving the relations, including the adoption of the basic agreement between North and South. But both failed to bring about the fundamental change in the inter-Korean relations. Rejecting the trend of the times, North Korea took a path towards a greater isolation, especially after the death of Kim Il-sung. 20 years after the end of the Cold War, it appears that the Korean Peninsula is facing another historical era of transformation. In his recent speech, Foreign Minister Yoon called this the third tectonic shift. Early this year, President Park Geun-hye also compared reunification to winning the jackpot, and during her visit to Germany last month, she presented her vision of peace reunification in a Western speech. I believe this vision stems from a sense of historical mission as a leader standing at a critical time in history where we have to prepare for the future of the Korean Peninsula. This vision did not come out of the blue. It is in line with the philosophy and vision of Trustpolitik that President Park has been advocating since even before she took office. Lately, the rivalries and realignment in East Asia has been getting more complex and volatile. Last week's Financial Times editorial made the assessment that in East Asia, nationalism is on the march and there is a return to great power politics. The editorial also reminded us of the devastation caused by nationalism in Europe in the 19th century. Last February, Dr. Kissinger had also warned at the Munich Security Conference that military confrontation cannot be ruled out as a vision by comparing the recent state of affairs in East Asia in the 19th century to Europe in the 19th century. In fact, experts are raising concerns that the Korean Peninsula, with the threat of an anachronistic North Korean regime, can become the most dangerous hotspot. The fundamental reason behind this crisis in the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia lies in the deficit of trust among the countries in the region. Confucius once said that without trust, there is no foundation for existence. Trust is an asset for cooperation and an indispensable element for prosperity. It is also a social capital that will eliminate the cost of mistrust and promote efficiency. The Trustpolitik of the Park Geun-hye government aims to build the infrastructure of trust among the countries in the region, and then, based on this infrastructure, promote a high-quality cooperation. We are already aware of many cases where by building trust, age-old conflicts were resolved or history changed its course of the direction. Just to name a few, the creation and development of the EU, the development of the US-China relations after establishing diplomatic ties, and the conclusion of the peace agreement between Egypt and Israel. For its part, Trustpolitik is based on a dispassionate assessment of the realities in the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia, as well as the unique historical experience of Korea. The basic thrust of Trustpolitik is to establish sustainable peace and cooperation in the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia by starting to build trust from the lower level. And the two main pillars of Trustpolitik are the Korean Peninsula Trust Building Process and Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Initiative. The former aims to make peace in the Korean Peninsula by exercising strong pressure and persuasion while keeping peace with a robust deterrence. On the other hand, the latter seeks to resolve what is called the Asia paradox, the phenomenon of increased conflicts over historical and territorial issues despite the deepening economic interdependence in the region. To this end, the initiative aims to build an infrastructure of trust in Northeast Asia by accumulating habits of cooperation and dialogue, starting from soft issues. The Eurasia Initiative, the other pillar of Trustpolitik, is a grand vision to restore Eurasia into one continent, which was divided in the Cold War period due to ideological barriers, and to create a continent of creation and a continent of peace. More specifically, the initiative aspires to connect the northern and southern economies centering around the Korean Peninsula by building a network of energy, transportation, and logistics through, among others, strengthening the Korea-Russia relations, the trilateral cooperation among the two Koreas and Russia, as well as Korea's relations with Eurasian countries. No doubt, the ultimate goal of Trustpolitik is the reunification of the Korean Peninsula. Based on Trustpolitik, the Park Geun-hye government is committed to overcome the four major challenges I mentioned earlier and proactively create an environment conducive to the eventual unification of the two Koreas. This commitment is well reflected in the vision for a unified Korea that President Park laid out in a speech in Dresden. That is, unification that will proceed in harmony with the interests of our neighbors, with the blessing of the international community, and will contribute to the cause of humanity. In this speech, she also presented three proposals that put the lives of the North Korean people first and can be immediately implemented if North Korea responds with sincerity. The proposals are aimed specifically to resolve humanitarian problems in North Korea, to build infrastructure for the welfare of the people in the North, and to promote integration of the people on both sides. The Dresden Initiative is serious, not based on a rosy illusion about unification. We know that the road to unification will be long and bumpy. This is why, working together with the neighboring countries and the international community, we should start making preparations and create a platform and environment for reunification. North Korea flatly rejected our genuine proposal, denouncing it as an attempt for unification through absorption, and has vehemently responded by hurling insults to our leadership. But we will continue to seek ways to implement the proposals with patience and sincerity. For its own future, North Korea should make a strategic decision to give up its nuclear ambition and hold on to our hands. Benjamin Franklin left a famous saying that, by failing to prepare, you are preparing for failure. Our generation is one that needs to leave this era with the historical mission to prepare for the future of the Korean Peninsula. As an old saying goes, opportunities cannot be caught from behind, as they don't have tails. If we fail to cope with the challenges we are facing today with collective courage and wisdom, we may later remorse painfully for having lost the God-given opportunity for the future of the Korean Peninsula. I'm a firm believer that opportunities only come when we make change instead of waiting for change, and that only those who are prepared can grasp such opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Foreign Minister. That's Cho Tae-yul that the larger covered that the external and also international security environment in Korean Peninsula, eventually in Northeast Asia, including that the essence of the trust politics and the Korean polity in Korean Peninsula for the years to come. I understand that most of you, all of you, have some questions and suggestions and recommendations for Vice Foreign Minister, but I hope you will do that after four distinguished panelists comment. Therefore, that our primary concern is that what is the essence and what is the substance of the trust politics, which is that the fundamental principles of Park Geun-hye government's policy for bringing peace and stability in Korean Peninsula. And our second primary concern is that how can we evaluate, how we can assessment and evaluation of different perspectives from four distinct ambassadors. Now, our last concern is that what is the international consensus to promote for peace and stability here in Korean Peninsula. The theme of our conference this time for is designing new Asia. That's why I will take this subject. Now, first, let me introduce you the German ambassador first. Each ambassador is requested and managed to comment for 7 minutes each. German ambassador Mafao said he just studied in Heidelberg and Berlin, and worked as a prosecutor in a non-training economy and federal office in Geneva. He worked in the Iran as the German embassy, also at the German command mission to NATO with Russia, and also last of all that the federal office as a deputy head of the division of that in the military. He just wanted to make a comment on this issue area in the German or European perspectives. Ambassador Raphael first, okay. Sprechen Sie Deutsch, but aber Sie speak English. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Shin. First of all, I should say that I'm very happy to be with you here at the Jeju Forum and to contribute to the discussion on Trustpolitik from a German perspective. And from a German perspective, I should say first of all that the government and German people are welcoming this initiative by Park Geun-hye for Trustpolitik. And in particular, those visitors that we are having here that are from the former GDR, that were leading figures in the transition process, like Richard Schröder or Lothar de Maizière, they told me in recent months, well, we were really wondering whether we should still keep on visiting Korea, since they seem to have given up on North Korea. And this is very difficult for us to accept as former East Germans. So in that sense, we can only but welcome the fact that there is a new dynamic on the inter-Korean relations, and there is a new strong impulse in order to try again to find ways to build relationship between the two Koreas and to build peace on the Korean Peninsula. Now the word Trustpolitik, if the foreign minister pronounces it, he said Trustpolitik, and that sounds very much like Ostpolitik. And if I'm looking at the different elements of Trustpolitik and trust-building process, it seems indeed that there are a number of similarities which what happened in Europe in the time after 1969, namely during the phase of Détente and during what we call German Ostpolitik. And in that sense, I may first say that it is really indispensable if one follows this kind of reconciliation of building new relationship, to have the inner Korean dimension and to have the multilateral dimension. In the case of Europe, German unification would never have come about without the multilateral dimension, without the OSCE and CSCE process. And in that sense, it may be important to register that the origin of this process on a multilateral basis was actually a Soviet proposal at that time for a new European security architecture, which most of the Western countries saw as an attempt to get the United States out of Europe. But in the end, the US accepted, Germany was strongly in favor. And the outcome of all of this, on one hand, it seemed to be status quo for a while, but on the other hand, it was the basis for building close relations between East and West, and for building a kind of framework which allowed for the fall of the Iron Curtain and which allowed for the unification of Germany. Now, in that context, if we look at East Asia now, or East Asia in a broader sense, of course, the situation is much more difficult. We don't see a kind of overall détente as we have seen it in the early 1970s, where between the Soviet Union and the United States, there was a new sense of trying to build the tone and trying to understand each other. There were negotiations on nuclear weapons. There were negotiations on security and confidence building measures. And of course, this kind of spirit needs to be created here in Asia as well, needs to be created between the United States and China. And hopefully, the trust-building process, the approach that you are offering, can also promote, in a broader sense, to a kind of new security architecture or new understanding of security in Asia and in the Asia-Pacific region. In any case, the difficulties that we are facing on the multilateral scene should not discourage in any way South Korea and the inter-Korean process to go ahead. Now, if we look into the bilateral dimension, then indeed, again, normalizing inter-Korean relations is certainly much more difficult than to do the same in the case of the two Germans. More difficult for several reasons. First of all, the GDR and the East Germans and the government, the regime, they could be fairly relaxed about allowing all these contact among people, allowing all the trade going forward between East and West. They could be fairly relaxed. They thought that they would never fear a threat for regime change, since to some extent they were protected by the Soviet Union in the sense that they never believed that the Soviet Union would allow the kind of regime change, would allow the wall to come down. They never believed that Gorbachev would allow the wall to come down. And in that sense, they could be much more relaxed against any consideration of regime change as an objective of a West German strategy than the North Koreans, which always have this in mind and which are, it seems to me, almost obsessed with this kind of perspective. Then secondly, of course, East Germany was never the kind of dictatorship and human rights ignoring to an extent that we have it in the GDR. And they never had nuclear weapons. And in that sense, it is much more sensitive and much more difficult to really get into business with those people. And there are limits to it. But on the other hand, it is absolutely indispensable to try and to build new inter-Korean relations. And it seems to me that the suggestions that President Park Geun-hye made in her speech in Dresden, and also the philosophy behind this, is very appropriate to try and find a way ahead. And if I may quote, she said, "No more than ever, South and North Koreans must broaden their exchange and cooperation. What we need is not a one-off or promotional event, but the kind of interaction and cooperation that enables ordinary South Koreans and North Koreans to recover a sense of common identity as they help out each other." I think this is the key message, and this is the kind of message which we would hope will be able to implement in the coming years. There are a number of concrete proposals, but let me come back to the more, let's say, to the approach as such. And there are two elements which I think are quite difficult. One is the fact that already under the present regime, under the present sanction regime, it may be difficult to build up the kind of projects and the close interaction between people and between economy as it was suggested. Secondly, as the speech was given in Dresden, and the North Korean reaction somehow shows their obsession with this idea of regime change and of Germany not being an example, but rather the model from a Korean side. So if there's anything that the Germans, East Germans can contribute, I'm West German, but I'm on a regular contact, then it is to understand what was the East German perspective. What now is the North Korean perspective? What is their thinking? What is their perception of these kind of proposals? And it seems to me that it is very important now to have an opportunity really to explain to North Korea that this is not about absorption, this is not about regime change, but this is about genuinely building relations between the two states at an equal level. And in that sense, I would strongly hope. We have seen differences in the recent 12 months. We have seen Kaesong restarted. We have seen family reunions. On the other hand, we have seen testing. We have seen shelling. Most recently, we have seen a war of words, if I may say so, or curses against the regime. But we have also seen that they will be sending big delegation to the Asian Games in Incheon. So I think there is reason to believe that there are possibilities for positive development. And I would hope that in not too far distance we would see a new round of inter-Korean high-level talks. We would see a new round of family reunion, and we would really see the start of such a trust-building process between the two countries. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Mafal, for your so eloquent and very persuasive presentation. And our next speaker is Russian Ambassador, Ambassador Punikov, the Ambassador of the Embassy of Russia here in Seoul, Korea. Ambassador Punikov is the graduate of Moscow State Institute of International Relations, and he took his doctorate degree in the Protestant Studies Institute at the Russian Academy of Science in 1991. And just looking over the careers as a diplomat, and he is a genuine China expert. He worked in the Russian embassy in China, Beijing, by 2 different times, almost 10 years. And so he came back to China as chief, the headquarters of the Russian Foreign Ministry. Later on, he became Consul General of Russia in Hong Kong, and also the Director General of the Asia Bureau, the first Asian Bureau, and Director General before he moved to Seoul as an ambassador. He has been working here in Seoul, Korea, as an Russian ambassador since 2009 for 4 or 5 years. He's the general expert both in China and the Korean Peninsula. Let me introduce you, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker, Ambassador Punikov.
Thank you, Professor Shin. It's my great honor and pleasure to take participation in this forum for the 4th time. Because, as you mentioned, I spent here almost 5 years, and practically I visit Jeju Island every year in this beautiful season. And I personally find the theme of this year's forum, Designing New Asia, and for this session, Ambassador's session, Peace in Korea, to be very topical and important for our part of the world. So many thanks to the organizers and participants. Looking back to the history of this forum, the Jeju Forum, I believe that in future it can be developed into so-called Korean Davos. And now let me introduce some ideas on the topic of discussions from the perspective of the Russian position. First, the situation in Northeast Asia and around Korean Peninsula is not a mere theoretical problem, but very practical for us, for Russia. I give you only one example, because North Korean nuclear test center is located just about 200 kilometers from Vladivostok. And one of the participants from Vladivostok, he is sitting here, he can prove that every time when something is happening in North Korea, nuclear tests or missiles tests, so people in the Russian Far East, they have some feelings. And instability and confrontation in the region can directly affect our huge strategic plans for quick development of the Russian Far East and Siberia. That's why we are determined to take advantage of our well-developed relations with both Korean states, our geographical neighborhood, and keen interest in stability here in order to ease confrontation and to build trust in this region. Second, our position on the nuclear problem of the Korean Peninsula is absolutely clear and principled. Russia will never recognize self-proclaimed nuclear status of DPRK. We constantly urge North Korea leadership to strictly follow all the UN Security Council resolutions, to abandon its nuclear missile programs and re-enter NPT and IAEA regime of comprehensive guarantees. At the same time, we consider to be inadmissible using the tensions as the excuse for building up military alliances and strengthening dangerous military activities over Korean Peninsula and in Northeast Asia. Third, while reaffirming our interest in the six-party talks as the only one effective way to resolve the nuclear problem, as it was stated recently in the joint statement signed in Shanghai several days ago by President Vladimir Putin and Chairman Xi Jinping, Russia believes that all current problems cannot be resolved by force. Addressing the Shanghai summit of the Conference of Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia, President Putin stressed the necessity of a new security architecture in this region, which could guarantee equal basis of interaction, genuine balance of power and harmony of interests. Practically same ideas were put forward in Shanghai by Chinese leader Chairman Xi Jinping. In order to implement this strategic task, Russia is intended to make the maximum use of our chairmanship in a special working group on the mechanism of peace and security in Northeast Asia, established several years ago within the Six-Party Talks Forum. In the more concrete way, we stand for firm observance of goals and principles of UN Charter, recognized regulations of international law, respect for the existing diversity of political, economic, social and cultural systems in the region. We believe that conflicts and crises should be settled by political and diplomatic means only, and with the taking into account the legitimate interests of all the participants and all the parties concerned. It's obvious for us that mutual understanding and trust can be achieved through widening and strengthening of dialogue and consultations mechanisms in the sphere of security, including joint analysis of existing and potential threats, trust-building measures, and provision of greater transparency in military realm. Fourth, there is no doubt that inter-Korean relations are of great importance and are a very important factor of stability and security in the region. Russia is in favor of not only the earliest resumption of the dialogue between North and South, but eventual unification of Korea. Our policy in this question is absolutely transparent and doesn't have any hidden agenda. United, prosperous, peaceful and friendly to us new Korea state, with a population of 75 million people and huge potential, would fully correspond to our interests and would become our true neighbor and very good, I should say, strategic partner. Naturally, Russia has no intention to interfere in the internal affairs of Korea and to give some kind of advices what's the best way to move towards unification. Nevertheless, we don't want to be in the position of bystander. We want to be useful to the extent that our good services and support are needed. As to our eventual contribution to the unification of the country, I would like to mention the Russians' initiative on launching major economic trilateral projects on the Korean Peninsula. And Vice Minister has already mentioned some of these initiatives. Usually we began to talk at the beginning of 90s of the last century, and we made some kind of job concerning three main projects or three main ideas. First is the connection of Trans-Siberian and Trans-Korean railroads. Second, delivery of natural gas from Russian Far East. And recently, several years ago, we made a very good job because now we have the gas pipeline connecting Sakhalin Island. Sakhalin Island is the main gas oil field with huge reserves and very good quality of natural gas. And we finished construction of the gas pipeline from Sakhalin to Khabarovsk and from Khabarovsk to Vladivostok. So natural gas is practically on our border with North Korea. And third project, which is also very interesting, is the delivery of electricity from Russian Far East to the Peninsula. We have a lot of potential in Russian Far East and Siberia, and this kind of electricity we generate is usually called green energy because it's being generated on the hydropower stations on the rivers. So we can deliver this electricity to the peninsula, and not only to the peninsula but also to Japan. Considering the support of these propositions by both South and North, Russia is ready to continue their cooperation in this field. We believe that the realization of trilateral projects will not only be economically beneficial to all three countries, but also will contribute to more stable situation on the Korean Peninsula, normalization of inter-Korean ties, greater openness of North Korea to the outside world, the importance of which President Park has stressed in her Trustpolitik strategy. We are glad to notice the cancelments of our plans with President Park's Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Initiative and Eurasian Initiative, and we are ready to coordinate our efforts in their implementations as our two leaders, President Putin and President Park agreed during my president's official visit last November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Funko, for your beautiful presentation. Our next speaker is Mr. Togo from Tokyo, Japan. No, from Kyoto, Japan. And Mr. Kyoto, Mr. Togo is a really well-known diplomat from Japan. He was during his service in Japanese Foreign Ministry. He was the Director General of the Treaty Bureau, which is one of the very important bureau in the Japanese Foreign Ministry, and also Director General of the Europe and Asia. And later on, he just moved to Hague as a Japanese ambassador to the Netherlands and worked here. And later on, that he just traveled all over the world as researchers and scholars, including Princeton, New Haven, and Taiwan, California, and also even Seoul. And he has been teaching in Kyoto Industrial University, Kyoto University Industry or Kyoto Industrial University?
Kyoto Sangyo University.
Thank you. Kyoto Sangyo, the Industrial University since 1910. And he is now teaching that university, not only as a scholar, but also as a diplomat. I understand that his grandfather was a former foreign minister. Am I right?
Yep.
Thank you. Long time ago. Next speaker, Ambassador Togo.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this forum. Whereas all other ambassadors speaking here are incumbent ambassadors, I am privileged to be an ex-ambassador. Which means that what I'm going to say from now does not represent Japanese government view and exclusively represent my own view, but it gives me a freedom to be at least partially critical against my government. I was not really prepared here to to express my views on which subject, but having listened to the keynote speech and other presentations, I think I have to say something about the current Japanese historical revision. The key concept by Prime Minister Abe in advancing in thinking, as written in his book, is getting out from post-war regime. In my view, this is badly explained. Getting out from post-war regime, what does he really wants to do? In my understanding, in my interpretation, there are three basic aspects. First, getting out from passive, irresponsible post-war Japanese security policy. Irresponsible, passivity. And here I think there are certain reasons. First, it is an overdue agenda after the end of the Cold War. And now Japan facing a kind of existential threat from China. I underline, existential threat from China. There are reasons for our government to take a more active and responsible position. And this is what Abe is trying to do. And this is commanding fundamentally support by our people, in my view. But second, getting out from the fallacy of Japanese post-war democracy, of creating an egocentric society. Now, this is purely a domestic issue, but as a Japanese, this is an important issue. And I am in support of Abe's trying to create some kind of societal values. My question is, Abe really capable of doing so? No, that's something else. The third one, I think is the most problematic one. The third one, getting out from undue humiliation. This is a very difficult issue. The most symbolic issue being Yasukuni and Kono statement or conflict. Now this is a very problematic and difficult issue. Why? Because there are certain Japanese psychological domestic aspects. There are an aspect of international psychology, particularly of the thinking of China and Korea. Now, up until December the 5th, 2013, in my view, though with certain contradictions expressed, Abe has managed these issues reasonably well. But on the 26th of December last year, by of going to Yasukuni, he broke this balance. So visiting Yasukuni in 26th of December last year was a diplomatic disaster for Japan. It gave ammunition to the Chinese hardliners to bash Japan. It distanced Korea, and it angered the Americans. Following this, there seemed to have emerged certain direction to touch the Kono statement, at which time United States intervened, and now we see certain positive development since then. But I am sure behind the curtain, strongly pressured by the Americans. And now, as the keynote speaker mentioned, we have conducted already twice Director General's level talk on Japan-Korean issues, including conflict. Now, where to go from here? Let's go from here. On Yasukuni, my own recipe is that at least Prime Minister Abe should stop going there. At least in the present day Yasukuni form. And I've been writing it from 2006 onwards constantly. One of the most difficult issues about Yasukuni is not China, but it's inside Japan, that emperor is not going. For Yasukuni supporter, the fact that the emperor is not going because in relation to the class A war criminals in China, this is a real problem. And the responsibility of Prime Minister is to do something about it, in order that Yasukuni will be transformed to a place where emperor, Chinese president, United States president, Prince can go. And so just continuation of Prime Minister's spirit does not fulfill his responsibility. One more point. Germany's comparison was great. But in my view, in the whole post-war Japanese development, Japan has reached a high point of apology, which was 1995 Murayama Statement. This is an equivalent of Japanese apology to President Weizsäcker's famous parliamentary statement in 1985. And I have written extensively recently, including this book which I wrote in April last year, that behind Weizsäcker's speech there is Karl Jasper's German's four notions of German guilt. And behind Murayama's statement, there is a philosophical thinking of Suzuki Daisuke. Suzuki Daisuke and Jasper express their views on war practically the same period. And that aspect has to be better known. Now, concept I do not know whether we have seen a light at the end of the tunnel or not. I do not know. But I hope in the Japan-Korean talks we would be able to find something, but with only one understanding, that both sides should cooperate. If the Korean side considers it is only Japan which should bow, I don't see hope. But if the Korean side considers that this is a common issue between Japan and Korea, which need to be resolved quickly, whereby your president and Prime Minister Abe should exert political direction, I think Japan and Korea can achieve a breakthrough. Now, just one word in relation to Japan-Korea relations. In a general mind of the Japanese people at this time of the century, in one word, there is a growing admiration towards Korea. Why? Because Korea is an amazing success, at least on three areas. Korea's success on democracy is breathtaking. I'm teaching in Kyoto. I'm explaining to my students how Korean students from 1945 onward really gave their life to Korean democracy, which Japanese students have not done. They are simply astonished in Korean economic success. And lastly, Korean cultural success, Korean way. All Japanese housewives are really enchanted by this new Korean way. That includes Mrs. Abe, incidentally, Prime Minister's wife. And at that time, this admiration rose in Japan. There was kind of general expectation that this is a great success. Success creates confidence. And usually, confidence creates an ability to accept something different. Now, in Japan-Korean case, it doesn't seem to be working this line. So, this is the book which I wrote for the Japanese public. It's not the book written for the Koreans. The title is Re-questioning Historical Recognition. Yasukuni, Comfort Woman, and Territorial Issues. I wrote in this book, there are 7 Japan's curses in Korea, and I tried to explain each of it. It's a simple comparison. Japan was occupied by the United States for 7 years, and it was a reasonably well-contained and generous occupation. But even these 7 years has created a psychological trauma. I wanted to tell the Japanese for 35 years, Japan has colonized Korea. Colonized. And particularly the last 10 years was a period of Japanization. The psychological impact of this, Japanese should understand more deeply. So I am not in a position to say anything about this 7 years. However, having said this, if Japan and Korea would come closer, I think, I'm not in a position to ask the Koreans, but for a betterment of relations, what I can say is that efforts should be done by both sides. Now, lastly, I think the best news I can speak in conclusion is North Korea. Wow, what happened yesterday? Astonishing. This agreement between the Japanese Director General and the North Korean Director General on handling of the production issue. Why? Because Prime Minister Abe is well known that he raised his domestic power through taking tough positions on abduction issue. So the least thing I have expected from Prime Minister Abe is take a flexible policy on abduction issue. But the agreement reached yesterday, basically consisted of two things. It's written in all newspapers in Korea this morning. It consists of two things. One, that North Korea is going to embark on a comprehensive overall investigation of what happened about these abductees and create a special committee. And immediately when this research, investigation activities begins, not ends, but begins, then Japan is going to lift all the sanctions which Japan introduced bilaterally. Then the natural question which other Japanese citizens would ask, if then after the investigation, what would happen if the Koreans said, oh, we investigated the 12 officially identified abductees and 360 or so of those who might be investigated, and the result, there was no one. This is a logical possibility. But still, without going into any actual investigation, Japan agreed to lift. And this is what is it? This is trust. This is trust. And how can Abe, in the year and a half now, have reached to this sense of trust toward the North Koreans? And I think this sense of trust connotates so well with President Park's policy toward North Korea. If I understand it correctly, President Park is trying to create a new holistic approach to North Korea, whereby trust will play an essential role. And I'm sure, and I hope that there has been good coordination between Japanese policy towards North Korea and your government policy. But here we see some kind of real rapprochement of your president's policy towards North Korea and my prime minister's policy to North Korea, about which I am receiving this amendment. Because this flexibility and trust which Abe has shown to North Korea, I was not expecting to see. I hope that this positive aspect will be somehow spread to other policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Togo. The focus of the Korea's foreign policy largely covers not only the United States and European countries, and also China, Japan, but also Southeast Asia too. On behalf of the Southeast Asian countries, I'd like to accept that another additional panelist, Ambassador Kolowit from Thailand. Ambassador Kolowit, would you like to? No, that. Oh, let's see. Oh, okay. That's very fortunate or unfortunate. Yes, very fortunate because we have only 15 minutes to go. Therefore, we have to save our precious time. To make the best use of our limited time, I'd like to I'll try to accept your views. Please speak very briefly so that the panelists will respond very briefly too, to save our precious time. Accept a few questions from the floor and from the audience, and then we'll back to our panelists too. Okay? The floor is open. You'd like to speak first? Okay. Okay. Oh, there are 2 minutes, okay? Then the gentleman over there. Well, would you like to speak, please, within 1 minute, okay?
Okay, yeah. I'm Suha from China, from University. My question to the panelists about the Deputy Prime Minister Cho. Regarding your
Vice Foreign Minister.
Vice Foreign Minister.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Thank you very much for your remarks, and give me the gift impression with one word, that is the linchpin of the Korea and American alliance towards the framework of the Northeast Asia. But it seems that at the moment we discuss about the
Asian paradox. So that means at the moment there's a serious problem over the Korean Peninsula and also Northeast Asia. So my question to you is at the moment we're talking about New Asia. So how the future, the New Asia to come? So that is something like the China's Korea, South Korea relation will be makes another linchpin towards the New Asia. Okay. My question goes to our Russian investor. We're talking about the important relation between Russia towards the geography closer to Korean Peninsula. So at the moment, it seems to me that recently Russians go back to Northeast Asia, especially Korean Peninsula. So it seems to me that regardless the Trustpolitik or the pressure mark between North and South Korea for the heading for the reunification in the long-term future. So what is the Russians' view or visions about that kind of process of reunification? Thank you.
Thank you. First, the Vice Foreign Minister, and next, Russian Ambassador, please. Oh, please.
Thank you for a good but very tricky question. I think your question is right to the point of the challenges we are now facing in dealing with all the foreign issues and security-related issues in Northeast Asia and Korean Peninsula. But as I mentioned in my opening statement, the backbone of the Korean foreign policy is the Korea-US alliance. But the Korea-China strategic partnership is also important. And as I mentioned, the Korea-China relations have been evolving very rapidly, particularly in the economic area. But based upon the growing economic interdependence, our relationship will further expand into the higher level of maturity in the coming years. But in the foreseeable future, I think that the Korea-US alliance will be the backbone of the Korea's foreign policy. But nobody knows what will happen in the future. But as you implied that the Korea-China relations could replace the sort of the linchpin for the peace and security in Northeast Asia. But as a Korean diplomat who is running the diplomacy on a daily basis, I must say that Korea-US alliance can go in hand with growing strategic partnership between Korea and China. That is not the relationship of zero-sum. It is a kind of a relationship of shared growth. As Korea-China relations grows continues in the future, it will also benefit the relationship between Korea and China, or Korea and the United States. It is not a zero-sum relationship in that way.
Thank you, Vice Foreign Minister. Next, Ambassador Punikov, please.
Thank you for this question. As I have already mentioned in my speech, Russia is very much interested in making all possible contributions to the stabilization of the situation here. For us, peace and security on the Korean Peninsula, and particularly and in Northeast Asia, is one of our priorities of our foreign policy, and especially now when Minister has already mentioned that President Putin, his policy, as he put it, it's one of the long-term strategies of Russia. So we are trying our best to make all possible contributions. That, as I mentioned, we put forward several concrete ideas in the kind of trilateral economic projects. But at the same time, it's not only Russia that can do this part of job. My question to Vice Minister is, may I ask you this question? My friend, German ambassador, slightly touched this problem, but this problem is very essential. The problem of existing bilateral sanctions, so-called May 24th measures. So now we reached practically this wall with some of our projects, first of all, Hassan Rachin projects, and without making any kind of adjustment of these measures or easing or modifying, we cannot move forward. So my question is, what's your opinion? What is the way out?
my understanding, the National Sun Project has no difficulties in further moving ahead because without going against the UN sanctions, we can move ahead with this project. It doesn't matter. Well, and sanctions, the German ambassador's comment was right, but the three proposals laid out in the President Park's speech are the ones which can be implemented without violation of the sanctions imposed by the United Nations and by any other countries. There is the proposals which can be implemented if there is sincerity in the part of the even in some projects, big, large-scale economic projects may require some sort of way out, but we do not envision the large-scale economic cooperating projects when we talk about cooperation with the project. In order to move into the large-scale cooperating projects, we need a fundamental solution of the problems and the sanctions regime.
Thank you, Vice Foreign Minister, and also Mr. Bulikov. Those who want to raise questions or comments, please raise up your hands all together. 1, 2, 3, okay, 3, 4, 5. Thank you very much. Ambassador Moon Tae-yul, that there are so many distinguished guests here who want to raise a question or you have to respond here. Therefore, we have done how about the 10 minutes? 10 minutes possible, okay? Thank you very much. Okay. Those who want to raise a question, please identify yourself, your name and your affiliation. Lady, please.
네, 저는 JTBC에서 외교부를 수집하고 있는 윤서영 기자입니다. 한반도 신뢰 정치에 있어서 주변국들 간의 공조는 매우 중요한 문제라고 생각을 합니다. 그런데 어제 북한과 일본이 대북 제재를 향후에 해제할 수 있다는 내용의 합의문을 발표했는데요. 이 같은 일본의 독자적인 움직임을 어떻게 보시는지 또 이게 주변국들 간의 공조 체제에 균열이 같다고 생각하시지는 않으신지 조태열 사관님 그리고 토모 이사님께 여쭤보겠습니다.
Thank you. Vice Foreign Minister first, and next Ambassador Togo.
Sorry, I failed to catch it, so I failed to catch the question.
Okay.
What was
The question was whether the lifting sanctions against North Korea by way of agreement between North Korea and Japan yesterday will be in violation of the sanctions regime imposed by the United Nations. Well, that's one of the important questions I have in mind, but I heard the news only from the press report. So, and the repeated explained by Ambassador today. So I have to look into the text and the content of the agreement between North Korea and Japan, and then I will be in a position to make an official comment.
Yes, please.
No, it is not in violation of the United Nations related sanctions. The sanctions which was lifted yesterday was exclusively bilateral. And I think this question was asked yesterday in Tokyo to Cabinet General Secretary Suga, and he exactly said the same thing. It is unrelated to UN-related sanctions.
Thank you. Next question, please. Okay. Gentlemen, please.
Thank you. Question for John Ambassador. I appreciate your presentation, and I will have a question about your approach. One thing, as far as I know, the last 2 years of joint unification from 1988 to 1990. In the last stage, early 1990s, the regime change approach has been pursuing, as far as I know, by the instruction of Bush administration during the time. So, I mean, continuously put through the implementation of the unification, even in spite of the some countries' reservations like Great Britain and French and Soviet Union. During that time, those countries still tried to have time to delay the process of unification. So I think I understand basic approach is some kind of engagement and exchange foreign policy. However, as far as I understand, the last several months of this unification process of Germany, I think the very strong the pursuit of unification, but led by your core administration, has been pursued. That is my understanding. As far as as far as you said that the stark contrast between the contrast of environment between Europe and Northeast Asia. Your country is the biggest country in Europe. Our country is the smallest country in Northeast Asia, and in the Soviet Union, President Gorbachev pursued the perestroika and glasnost policy. So it's a restructuring and openness policy. But and the Soviet Union was declining power during the time, and China is now rising. So I think some different kind of environment has been created in this area. Okay, so what is your opinion on this regime change approach? Not by our government, but usually the unification has been made by some such regime change.
Thank you. Yes. Mr. Mathar, please.
Thank you very much. Let me put it like that. German unification would not have happened without Gorbachev's letting it happen. Second, when it came around, it was President Bush who was the first one to strongly support it. Thirdly, it was the East Germans that decided we want to be one people. It was the East Germans that decided unification, not the West Germans. Even after the wall came down, German Chancellor Kohl, in his 10 points for the future of Germany, did not mention the word unification. It was the East German chamber, East German parliament, the newly elected, that decided that they wanted to go towards unification. And again, in that sense, the West German agenda was no agenda of regime change. But it was an agenda that assumed that as the two countries are working together more closely and closely, as there is more exchange between people and between economy, this will lead to a rapprochement between people and governments.
Thank you. Excuse me. As time is so much limited, I'm sorry awfully to say that I have to, we have to accept only one question from the floor. Who raised the last question? Yes, please.
Again, my question is for the German Chancellor.
Excuse me.
That's too much.
Would you like to identify yourself, please?
I'm Mutai Alagap from the Carnegie Endowment. I'm sorry I elevated you to the Chancellor's position. My question is I'm trying to understand the role of Ostpolitik in the eventual unification of Germany. I understand the collapse and the unification is really, as you mentioned, a function of Gorbachev's acceptance and the perestroika process. So what role did Ostpolitik actually play in bringing about unification of Germany?
Well, it was key, and it was, let's put it that way, the West Germans integrated themselves into NATO and into the community of Western countries. On that basis, they then went under Eastpolitik for reconciliation with our eastern neighbors and for acceptance of the status quo, which meant treaties with Moscow, with Warsaw, and with East Berlin. And so it was the German government that took the initiative and took the lead actually in order to stimulate and to get the process which led to the fall of the Berlin Wall. And it was also the East German government that actually argued that this proposal for a kind of new security architecture should be positively or constructively be taken up. So what I want to say is it was a prerequisite to have a strong alliance in NATO and with the United States. But it was not sufficient. On this basis, we took the initiative. And this is precisely where I feel that Korea is taking its initiative now.
Thank you. There are so many questions, and comments, and suggestions, and recommendations which we have to discuss and that we have to raise. However, as the time is so much limited, I am awfully sorry to say that we have to close the questions and answers from the audience. Now that to make our last time left 5 minutes, I'd like to give all of the panelists, including Vice Foreign Minister, to give 1 minute each to defend himself in the last moment. Our Vice Foreign Minister, Mr. Cho, just made a beautiful presentation on Korea's foreign policy, with the special reference to external and also secure environment in Northeast Asia, plus the trust politics of the partner region. Now I'd like to give the Vice Foreign Minister one last minute for his last defense.
I don't know whether there's anything for me to defend myself, but anyway, I'm somewhat relieved to hear Ambassador Togo to speak something about the Korea and Japan relations. I expected to hear some kind of rebuttal from him to the comments I made in my opening statement, but I was somewhat relieved that he is also critical of his own government in some aspects. And I agree with him that effort should be made by both sides in order to move ahead. And but I don't think the deterioration of the relations between Korea and Japan, and between Japan and China, and even between North and South Korea will continue long into the future. I'm basically an optimist, and particularly optimistic about the future of Korea and the countries in Northeast Asia. And the Soviet Union leader Lenin once said that things have to get worse before they get better. We are at the bottom of the relationship between Korea and Japan, and the only way for us to do is to hit the bottom and move up. So I'm quite optimistic about the future. And I recently read an article in some foreign magazines written by a young lady from North Korea who defected from North Korea. And she said in an article that Juche is dying or has died already, and the markets are on the rise. And she believed that it is the black market generation to which she belongs who is going to change the North Korean society as a whole from the bottom up. I saw great hope for the future of the Korean Peninsula in her remarks. And I think as one of the members of the leadership in the foreign ministry, I will continue to work very hard with the sense of historical mission to make her dream a reality.
Thank you, Vice Foreign Minister. Well, Mr. Mafra, would you like to defend yourself within for 1 minute, please?
No need to defend. I think my message is Trustpolitik has to be a long-term approach. It took 20 years in the case of Germany until it bore fruit, and it's essential in the pursuit of such policy all the time to see from their own perspective and to see from the other side. And thirdly, I should mention that we have here with us Professor Frank, who is a frequent visitor to North Korea over the last 25 years, and who this morning described to me to the kind of analysis which says that the market economy, the black market economy that is developing, contributes to opening the minds of people in North Korea.
Ambassador Punikov? Your last moment to defend yourself for 1 week.
I'm very peaceful. I'm not going to defend my positions because you know that I fully agree with Vice Minister Cho. I'm also cautiously optimistic about the future of the Peninsula and our region, Northeast Asia. The main thing, I think there is no doubt that everybody is in favor of trust-building process in this part of the world because Northeast Asia and especially Korean Peninsula is maybe the last region in the world where we can feel practically every year we can feel the breathing of the Cold War. Sometimes very dangerous, like it happened last springtime. So I think all of us, we have to make all necessary measures and to unite our efforts to achieve or to start this trust-building process using our advantages. All of us, we have our advantages, and we are united by the common task and common goal. So this is the problem. The problem is that we are not to waste time, because from this point of view, time, especially I'm talking about nuclear issue, time is playing against us. So we are to be very energetic, and but at the same time to think twice before we make one step. Thank you.
Togo-san, your last moment to defend yourself.
Thank you very much. I was heartened to listen to the concluding statement by our Vice Minister. I was also a diplomat until 2002, and diplomats have a tendency of adopting certain optimistic view of the future, and I share with your optimism. And I just wanted to mention my one statement on Russia, because during my service, I spent 17 years in relation to Soviet Union and Russia. And naturally, I have been observing with great interest and concern on what was happening in Crimea and Ukraine. But I was trying to tell the Japanese public first that Crimea is something special for the Russians. And also that President Putin never equated Crimea and Ukraine as a whole. And President Putin is not intending to take the same position to Crimea in Ukraine, and I do hope that some kind of agreement among the Ukrainians would emerge, which Russia, Europe, Japan would all help, all support, and which eventually would bring some kind of peace in that region. And I underline that this has a very deep Asian perspective, because everything what is happening in Crimea and Ukraine have to be considered in the overall texture of current international situation, in which rise of China is a key factor. So I have observed with great interest President Putin's visit to Shanghai, and some of the positive agreements reached between the two sides. I have no disagreement whatsoever, but I hope that in the overall context, further developing relations between Japan and Russia, and Russia and other countries also, as you have mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Federal Republic of Germany and Republic of Russia and also Japan, they all are very important countries to Korea's foreign and economic policy implementation, not only in terms of diplomacy, but also in terms of economy, culture, and so on. Therefore, we are sure that their perspectives, respectively, was so much meaningful and was so much helpful to approaching the new policy in the future for Korea's foreign student for the years to come. Particularly our Vice Foreign Minister's presentation was so well oriented, very comprehensive, and suggestive and informative. We are learning a lot, and also we appreciate so sharp perception of those ambassadors here today on some very critical questions, which surrounded the question on the floor. We are sure that the Korean government's policy, the trust building, will contribute in the future to bringing peace and stability, not only here in the Korean Peninsula, but also eventually to the Northeast Asia for the years to come. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your great cooperation. Thank you very much.